All righty. Good morning and welcome to the BCD COG Air Quality Coalition. We're very happy to have you here today, and we are going to try to go around the virtual room and have everybody introduce themselves. We'll see how that goes. Natalie, you want to go ahead and start?
Sure. My name is Natalie Olson. I am the Campaigns Director for Conservation Voters of South Carolina.
Okay. Mayor Rainwater?
Christy Rainwater. I'm the mayor of Hanahan, South Carolina.
Thank you. Kristen? Kristen may have walked away from us. I'm not sure who owner is.
Oh, it might be me. I'm Sharon Bunch with Joint Base Charleston. I'm the Air Program Manager.
Welcome, Sharon. Jim?
Jim Posner with GEL Engineering. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Sorry, Jennifer?
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Hawthorne, Environmental Engineer at Nucor Steel.
Welcome. Elaine?
Elaine Morgan, CEO of the Berkeley Chamber. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Francis?
Hi, I'm Frances Waite. I'm with the South Carolina Forestry Commission, the Urban and Community Forestry Coordinator. And today I'm going to talk about tree canopy and air quality.
Cool. Amy?
I am Amy Curran, and I work in the Bureau of Air Quality at DHEC. I am the outreach coordinator for the Bureau.
Great. Charles?
I am Charles Ackerman, Mayor of Harleyville and Chairman of the COG Board.
Welcome. Sam?
Hey, I'm Sam Christmas. I also work in the Bureau of Air Quality at South Carolina DHEC, and I'll be providing a DHEC update this morning.
Awesome. Jeffrey? How about Mark? All righty. Larry?
Good morning. This is Larry Arrington representing Cooper River Partners.
Welcome, Larry.
Thank you.
I think that might be it, except for our folks that may have stepped away for a minute to get a cup of coffee, as those things go with these meetings. I will go ahead and turn it over to Natalie from the Conservation Voters of South Carolina, who's going to talk to us about reducing energy emissions in South Carolina.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for inviting me to speak today. I appreciate the opportunity. So while the transportation sector competes with the energy sector for the most greenhouse gas emissions, I wanted to focus talking with you all today about the opportunities that South Carolina has to substantially reduce our emissions as it relates to the energy sector in retiring our coal plants in the state. And so just kind of like an overview for context, South Carolina energy generation, we generate about 58% of our energy from nuclear power, and coal is about 15%, and then the rest is solar, natural gas, biomass, et cetera. And so solar's at about solar's pretty low, solar's at about 0.01. And so, but we have two utilities actually, Duke Energy Progress and Duke Energy Carolina, that cross the state lines. And so taking into consideration the power that they're generating that South Carolinians are using, our consumption as South Carolinians is more like 28% coal. And so coal-fired power plants, as y'all may be aware, are really the biggest emitters of lots of greenhouse gas toxins, especially mercury. They make up 40% of the mercury emissions in the country. And they also contribute carbon dioxide and other toxic emissions to the atmosphere. And so when looking at where our coal plants are and what we have in operation right now in South Carolina, we've got our three major utilities, Duke, Dominion, and Santee Cooper. And we have 5 operational coal plants in the state of South Carolina. There's the Wateree plant in Richland County, that's Dominion's. Dominion also owns the Coke plant in Orangeburg and the Williams plant in Berkeley. And so that one's probably most relevant to us, but there are plenty of studies out there that show how far stuff like mercury can travel in the air before it's contaminating waterways and stuff. And so we've got those 3 from Dominion. Santee Cooper has 2, the Cross plant in Berkeley and the Winyaw plant in Georgetown. And then Duke, as I mentioned earlier, they operate in both South Carolina and North Carolina. They don't have any coal plants in South Carolina, but they do have 6 in North Carolina, and 2 of them are right on the state border. And so I mentioned, the environmental and kind of human health impacts of burning coal and the toxins. And I don't know if y'all saw in the Post and Courier just the other day, they had a great article about the mercury emissions from the Winyaw plant in Georgetown. And I thought it was so interesting in that article because they shared that 61 water bodies in South Carolina have advisories on at least one species of fish for mercury toxicity, and recommends that you only eat them maybe once a week, once a month, or some of them are not at all. So if y'all didn't see that article, I encourage you to check it out because it was an interesting explanation of how mercury enters our rivers and shows up in our food sources. So one other note that came out in that article was that some of these plants, especially the Santee Cooper plants, haven't updated their water pollution permits in over a decade or so. And so we know that there are toxins coming out of those plants, and that's just something for us to be mindful of as we're looking at what the impacts of these are and how we can go about retiring them early. And so I'm focusing more on the public health and air quality impacts here, but it is worth noting that it makes economical sense to retire coal plants too. We now are finding that building a new solar farm is cheaper than running an existing coal plant. And so there's lots of data out there, and the market has gotten so great with renewables that it really is more expensive to continue to use outdated coal plants. And so we have opportunities with our 3 major utilities in the state to retire these plants early and look to other sources of generation like renewable that are going to be cheaper for customers too. And so digging into that a little bit specifically, we've got Santee Cooper. Santee Cooper is as you may remember, was involved in the BC Summer Project. They were a 45% owner in that project. And so in 2017, when that project was abandoned, the General Assembly passed legislation to determine whether they were going to sell or reform or switch up the management at Santee Cooper. And so with this decision, it's interesting because it comes at a crossroads, or it comes at a time when Santee Cooper's at a crossroads because they rely on the Winyaw plant and the Cross plant, and those are both very old. I think one of them might be, I think it's they can be 50 years old. And so in looking at the opportunity there, Santee Cooper really they're at a point where they're changing up their plans. They were invested in a nuclear project that is no longer happening, and so they have an opportunity to look at the options for retiring coal early. And the Sierra Club and Southern Environmental Law Center commissioned a study not too long ago that modeled all the different scenarios for what it would look like if we were to retire coal plants early. And they found that the least cost scenario was one that we retired coal as quickly as possible and invested in renewables. And so, like I said, it makes economic sense in addition to being something that would be beneficial for public health and the environment. And so Santee Cooper appears to be moving in the right direction. Their CEO announced that they're planning to retire the Winyo plant. And so, you know, it looks like they're moving in the right direction. There's still sort of a big question mark of what's going to fill that capacity. Is it going to be gas, which comes with emissions and environmental issues, not quite as extreme as coal, but similar, or is it going to be more geared towards renewables? So that's sort of a yet to be determined at the State House and at Santee Cooper in their planning. And if we look at, so kind of shifting gears and looking at Dominion is another interesting example, because Dominion was also part of the same project that Santee Cooper was, the VC Summer. They were also an owner in that. And so really they sort of are having to pivot at the same time as Santee Cooper. And especially in light of, I was able to talk to this group about this time last year about the Energy Freedom Act, which South Carolina passed in the spring of last year, which promotes competition and renewable energy. And so competition from independent power producers was a big theme in that law. And so Dominion's kind of looking at this crossroads also. And unfortunately, they you know, haven't put forth any proposals that take advantage of the economics and kind of the common sense approach, really, of retiring these coal plants. And so I mentioned earlier, Dominion has they have 4 coal units at 3 plants in the state. So they've got Wateree, Williams, and Cope. And the Wateree and the Williams plant were built in the 70s. Those are approaching 50 years old. And Dominion just recently filed their integrated resource plan with the Public Service Commission, which is similar to their comprehensive plan. All the utilities in the state have to plan out their 15-year horizon of how they're going to meet electricity demand in the state. And with that proposal, they did not model any coal retirements before 2028 and didn't model any additions of solar or storage before 2026. So that's an issue that's being discussed currently at the Public Service Commission. There are other groups who are involved in that case that have shown, similar to Santee Cooper modeling, that if you focus on retiring coal early and investing in renewables, it can help us reduce our emissions, but also will show up in the form of lower bills for customers. So you know, that's an interesting comparison to look at Dominion's kind of lack of coal retirement versus Santee Cooper. And then we have Duke. Duke, as I mentioned, has 6 coal plants and 2 are along the border. They are also in the process of their integrated resource plan at the Public Service Commission. They're a little bit behind on the timing than Dominion is, and they've actually modeled a lot of different scenarios that do involve retiring coal. They haven't picked a path yet, and the Public Service Commission has not approved it. But it's interesting looking at Duke, because they're driven a lot in part by the laws that are in North Carolina. There's laws and plans that are very focused on emissions reductions. And so that is something that's driving a lot of these efforts to reduce emissions, in addition to the company has a net zero goal by 2050. But that's also something that a lot of other utilities have, like Dominion has that, but they seem to be, the company seems to be taking more of a slower approach in getting to their emissions reductions. And so really, I just wanted to share with y'all today that there are lots of opportunities to address our emissions. I mentioned the transportation sector competes with the energy sector, and so there is a lot of work that needs to be done in electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure. There was just recently the new electric bus facility that was announced in the upstate, and a report actually came out last week that showed that South Carolina is leading, and the Southeast is leading in electric vehicle manufacturing and jobs, but we're lagging way behind when it comes to electric vehicle adoption and infrastructure. And so there's huge opportunity in the transportation sector, but really I think that we're presented with kind of a unique time here with all of our utilities looking on the horizon of what they're going to do with these aging coal plants that are contributing so many emissions. And I think there's an opportunity there for us to dramatically reduce a lot of those toxins that we're putting in our waterways and our air. And so I mentioned Santee Cooper is on the list at the State House, and these the two other investor-owned utilities are being sort of hashed out at the Public Service Commission. So there's a lot of different avenues, but there's a lot of opportunity there. So I think that wraps up what I wanted to share with y'all.
Thanks, Natalie. Does anybody have any questions for Natalie? You can just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away. No questions.
I do have a question.
Oh, good, Amy.
So I know that like people are calling for homes to put solar panels on their houses and things like that. And I'm sure that's a small percentage. But as far as solar, would the solar panels be part of what the energy companies are using to produce energy? Or are you talking about solar like for homes?
That's a great question. I'm referencing industrial level solar, and so there's this distinction, like you're saying, between residential solar, which is people putting solar panels on their homes, and then there's the solar that utilities companies invest in. And so a utility like Dominion can generate a big portion of their power from solar by either building the projects themselves or buying that power from an independent power producer, which are the solar companies in the state. And so that's a decision that's made based on the price points set at the Public Service Commission, whether, say, Dominion would choose to build the solar project themselves versus buy it from an independent power producer. But really the bulk of the generation here that we're talking about making up with retirement of these coal plants is at the industrial level, is solar farm level renewables.
Okay, great. Yes, that answers my question. Thank you.
I have a quick question as well. I know CARTA is working, I feel like, somewhat rapidly, but I guess, that's all subjective. I'd love to know your thoughts on that. But moving toward electric buses. So when you say we're real far behind, is that current, or are you aware of current plans? Or I mean, obviously we're heading in the right direction. Are we not heading there as rapidly as needed? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot that goes into that, but I think we're lagging behind in terms of the electric vehicle and truck and bus adoption that we currently have. So that's a report that just came out recently that showed that while our statistics in the Southeast were very focused on manufacturing and jobs in the electric vehicle space, we don't have the same adoption levels as other regions do, and that's a lot in part due to our regulations around the infrastructure and selling of electric vehicles in the state. And so there are lots of barriers, I think, in terms of what types of cars we can sell in the state. Like there are lots of like dealership laws and stuff like that, where, for example, Tesla cannot open up a dealership in South Carolina. And that's because of our state laws, and we have laws around who can sell power at charging stations, and so like they can't operate exactly like a gas station would, because technically they would be an entity selling power, and our power utilities have a monopoly on selling power in the state. And so there are laws that are preventing us, I think, from being able to rapidly adopt electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure. But I think it's also like what you're saying, local investments. I think that we are doing the bus rapid transit and CARTA's efforts and others. We have Proterra, the bus manufacturer in the state of South Carolina, has tried to. We've switched some of our school buses to electric school buses, but I think in comparison to how quickly other states are making these transitions, they don't have the legal barriers that we do, and their investments are just quicker and more. It's more rapid of a transition. And so I think as we start to break down some of those barriers for electric vehicles and buses, we're going to see a lot of these plans that we have to switch over fleets and stuff like that be able to come to fruition quicker. But it also depends on the local investments. If we've got enough money to complete these projects, or if they're competing for funds, that other projects are given.
And it sounds like from what you're saying, a lot of the legislation is more on the state level at the state house. So I'm assuming there's, some sort of an advocacy up at that level as well.
Yes, yeah, there definitely is a fair amount of state level laws that dictate what we're able to do with electric vehicles. But I will say, I think a big switch that we're going to see and a big mark of progress is when local governments start making commitments to switch their fleet to clean, like to switch all of their municipal vehicles to clean energy, to look at what they're doing for park maintenance and lawn care and leaf blowers, like all of those layers of local government, and have the ability, I think, to start implementing and to start getting there. And the more that local governments are doing that, the more that the state is going to see that this is the direction that local governments want to go in. And so I think, especially in a place like South Carolina, where we have so much home rule and we have so much emphasis on communities being able to make decisions for themselves, I think we'll see, like a good example is the city of Columbia. They've made a lot of commitments when it comes to clean energy and electric vehicles, and that is fodder for the discussion at the State House of, well, how are we going to achieve this? We have to allow them to allow municipalities and local governments to be able to meet these goals that they've set. And so I think while a lot of the barriers are at the state level, I think most of this is driven at the local level in terms of like what communities are making a priority.
Well, that is really good for me to know. I will definitely look at some fleet stuff for the city of Hanahan, and I'm actually excited to share that our downtown area is in the process of switching completely to solar lighting, and it wound up saving us a ton of money over going through the normal. So anyway, something hopefully we're all
great.
Yeah, we're in the process of doing that right now, so I'm excited about that, but we'll look into it for fleet as well.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Okay, do we have any other questions for Natalie? Then we will go ahead and turn it over to oh, I'm sorry. Did somebody have a question?
Yeah, I had one more question.
Sure.
I guess aside, I do the air program out at the air base, but me as a, citizen thinking long term, with all these renewable energy, electric cars, electric buses, what's down the road for when all these batteries, need disposal, or the process for revamping these batteries? What kind of pollution is going to be emitted or produced, to revamp all these electric cars, all these electric buses? And then also the solar farms, I don't want to drive down the highway and see fields and fields of solar panels. I'd rather see trees. So that's the other question, on the flip side. How much green space and land are we going to destroy for solar panels?
Mm-hmm.
I guess that was a two-part question.
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked that, because that's definitely something that I've been asked a lot and have digged into a little bit. And talking about the solar panels first, there is a great report or blog post or something like that from Upstate Forever. They actually did an analysis of what it would take for us to generate all of our electricity from solar panels, and compared those kind of competing interests that you're talking about of how much land consumption would it take for us to generate our electricity from solar. And they found that and pointed to a lot of statistics about the land use consumption as it compares to coal and natural gas is actually a lot less. If we were to power 100% of our power from solar panels, it actually results in less land consumption when you consider the infrastructure that goes into coal and powering our population with coal. And so all of the pipelines and railways and everything that's used to transport coal and natural gas is when you consider sort of that full picture. So in comparison, solar is not as destructive in terms of land use. And the other thing kind of on that point is that there's significant progress being made on using land where solar farms are for agriculture and farming, and also for pollinators. And so this has been there's been a lot of really great projects around where we can plant pollinating wildflowers and stuff for habitat for bees and birds and all that works out. It's very complementary to solar panels. And similarly, they're finding now that you can graze animals and raise livestock on land that has solar panels. Actually, raising goats is like a perfect thing to do on land that has solar panels, because they keep down all the vegetation and enjoy the shade. And so there are some that while solar does use land, it almost never uses it almost never is placed in a place where there's a forest, like where there's, if there's wetlands or forest, that's not it doesn't make sense economically to build a solar farm there. And it doesn't make sense, like you're saying, visually, but we have a lot of protections on those things. And so like clear cutting a forest for a solar farm is not something that is shaking out to be a really significant problem, just because of all the hurdles there. And so I think your other question about the batteries in electric vehicles and I think that comes up a little bit with solar too, as we retire some old solar, and that is certainly it's a consideration, and it's something that we need to plan for, especially when it comes to electric vehicles. I think we can work to address those things, but also, on the hopeful side, I've learned recently that the new car batteries that are coming out last 4 times as long as a normal car. And so I think that the technological advances that we're seeing right now, the cars on the road, those batteries are lasting as long as a normal car, a couple 100,000 miles. And now the batteries that are coming out are much have much longer lives. And so I think the combination of technology and us being slow to adopt EVs is going to provide us for not as much, that's not as much of a concern necessarily, just because I think that the technology is advancing, but it's certainly, it's part of the consideration. It's something that we need to look at, balancing the harms of, nothing's perfect, nothing's a silver bullet. We're not going to find a perfect solution, but I think those are definitely considerations and are important to weigh against some of the other harms or risks that come with fossil fuels.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, Natalie. We're going to turn it over to Francis Waite now to talk to us about tree canopies and air quality. Francis, are you ready?
Yeah. Let's see. Can you see it on your screen now?
Not yet.
Press share screen and then a blue screen.
There you go.
Okay, all right. Can you see it now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I'm Frances Waite. I work with the South Carolina Forestry Commission. Today, I'm going to talk about how urban tree canopy impacts air quality in South Carolina communities. So we partner with Green Infrastructure Center on some projects. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about our tree planting campaign that we have been working on this year. But first, I wanted to talk a little bit about air quality and why it matters. So from the World Health Organization, 29% of all deaths and diseases are from lung cancer, 17% from lower respiratory infection, 24% deaths from stroke, 25% heart disease, and 43% from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So you can see it's really important for us to be talking about this. And also with the COVID pandemic, it's found that, with the reduction of particulate pollution, people are 8% more likely to die from COVID-19. And then another issue we need to address is equity in communities of color that are disproportionately impacted. And so that's going to be really important. We are kind of identifying some areas that are possible planning areas with this study. And so kind of addressing the climate change and global warming as well. So here is just kind of a little graphic that talks about how green infrastructure mitigates poor air quality. And it's something that you might want to consider. So definitely shade helps by reducing the temperature. And also the trees can take up air pollution in their tissues and on the surface area of their leaves and trunks. And trees aren't perfect. So they do have pollen and they do release volatile organic compounds. And the reason the volatile organic compounds are concerning is because they're bad for human health and they can turn into ozone in the presence of sunlight and other pollutants. But why they have these volatile organic compounds is because it can kind of release it and get, attract, when they have pests on the tree, it can attract other beneficial insects. So it's kind of a signal for trees. So that's kind of just part of it. So I want to talk a little bit about how urban trees affect air quality. I'm going to talk a little bit about shade first, and then I'm going to talk about how they capture pollution, and then how they sequester greenhouse gases, and also impact public health in a positive manner. So first of all, shade is really important because of the temperature reduction that it provides. So, it just makes places like sidewalks, parking lots, and homes a lot more pleasant. And we like to go look for that tree when we're parking in the parking lot. You can cool an area by 2 to 7 degrees by having a significant amount of trees in cities. And the formation of some air pollutants, such as ground level ozone, are accelerated under higher surface temperatures. And so it's good to kind of cool things down. And the key message would be that trees reduce urban heat islands, allowing people to enjoy the outside safely by avoiding heat stresses. And how do urban trees affect air quality? Another way is capturing pollution on leaves or absorbing it in their tissues. For our neighborhood, I live right behind where the Sofa Superstore tragedy happened, where 9 men died. And we were here. There was a lot of our neighborhood was here, and it was a lot of just black smoke released into the air. There was a lot of petroleum type products in there, and so you could just see ashes and everything. And so the trees were able to take in some of that rather than it coming in our houses and running through our air system. So it kind of helped with that, and that was just kind of a personal thing that I noticed. But mortality rates, studies show decline in cities due to tree cover in areas with more precipitation have higher removal rates for particulate matter. So if you can think of precipitation kind of washing things away. Trees in Atlanta remove 64.5 million tons of particulate matter annually. And so the key message here is trees improve respiratory health, making people less likely to suffer ill effects from asthma, complications from flus or coronavirus. And there's also a cost savings and lower medical costs. And then, of course, sequestering greenhouse gases is really important. They sequester sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide. And I'm going to show you from some of our calculations using the iTree calculator in some of the cities that we've been working in for this tree planting campaign. So it's, stores carbon and prevents its release, and trees mitigate the impacts of climate change. And so the key message would be that trees mitigate and reduce the impacts of climate change, thus saving money and protecting lives and properties. So also trees encourage health. So when trees are not present, distances are perceived to be longer and hotter and less pleasant. And so people kind of look at that and say, I don't think I'm going to walk there, So you kind of look down the path, like I walk on the Greenway a lot, and there's certain areas that are kind of marshy and have a lot of trees, and other areas are kind of like more open and less interesting. And so it just makes it more enticing and enjoyable to have that shade, and to just visually, it makes it look like you're not walking as far. So key message, trees can increase fitness by increasing walking and reduce obesity that lead to diabetes, heart stress, and other problems. And there's been a lot of studies on that. So it's nice to kind of like have some things to back those types of things up. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our tree campaign cities that we're working with. So right now we're partnering with Green Infrastructure Center, who's helping us with mapping in Greenville, Irmo, and Somerville. And so the purpose of this project is to map the existing tree canopy, so kind of know where everything is, to quantify ecosystem service benefits, which I'm going to talk a little bit about our iTree calculator, and then identify possible planting areas. And so we have maps of possible planting areas. I'm not showing you that today, but they exist. And then we develop goals for maintaining or increasing canopy, working with the communities. And so that's been kind of fun. That's what we're doing right now, is trying to figure out what's reasonable. For example, if you have 100% of areas that you can plant, we're only recommending that you plant, look at 50% of them, because, you want to have parks and fields and gardens and things like that. So you wouldn't necessarily want to just plant everywhere you could plant. You want to strategically placing canopy in low canopy neighborhoods using data. So, areas that might not have got as much attention as previously, we're able to kind of identify those areas and make sure there's more equity happening. And then create and build community capacity for planting and caring for urban forests through a tree planting campaign. So basically, we're trying to build capacity and get them more resources to kind of think about, why we need to do this and what do we need to do. So here's an example of Somerville's tree canopy. So it's 43%. You can see the impervious surface is 28%. And then the map, you've got the dark green is the tree canopy, and then the light green is tree canopy over impervious. So this is kind of an example of just some of the information that we're kind of looking at. And of course, we've got a lot more maps that we work with as well, but just to kind of give you a feel. So there's the iTree calculator that the U.S. Forest Service created. And so this kind of shows, what Somerville, like with the, ozone and the different things, carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, you can see how much is removed per year. And so that just kind of gives an example of kind of in supported trees. And here we have the iTree calculator kind of continued, and it's showing the carbon sequestration and the storage in Somerville. You see that bottom one, that bottom number is huge, and it's the total, and it doesn't really change that much because we're, the trees are kind of there. They're maybe taking on some growth each year. They're maybe dropping some limbs. So that number is kind of static. So it doesn't, we don't have an annual rate for that. Now, this is kind of interesting. So here is the surface heat and shade for Somerville. And so you've got the number of days above 100 degrees for Dorchester County. So you can see that, 18 days per year. We've got, within 1971 to 2000, those were the days. And, when you look out, a little bit further into the future, we see like 106 days per year, which nobody likes to hear that. And then if bold action is taken, and just things in addition to tree planting and as well, we can maybe reduce that. But just something to be aware of where things are kind of getting predicted, and helps make decisions. So this is showing that the higher the tree canopy percentage, the surface temperature decreases. So there's a direct correlation between that. So on the left there, you've got the tree canopy, the temperature, And on the right, you have the tree canopy percentages right there. And that's Somerville. And kind of looking at Irmo, just to give you a little bit of flavor. Irmo is kind of a smaller area that we're studying, and they've got a 52% tree canopy. I was just going to say, a couple of years ago, Somerville had a 63%, like maybe in 2014, and it just had like a lot of building and, you know, et cetera happening. So it can, you know, change quite dramatically quickly when you think about the Charleston area and what's going to be happening, like kind of in that Ravenel area, you know, in Johns Island and different things. That's really going to change our percentage tree canopy coming up, and in a very quick order. So, you know, that's just, you know, kind of to think about. It's a snapshot in time. So what we're looking at. So 52% and impervious surface 26%. And then you can kind of look at the map and see the tree canopy and the tree canopy over impervious. So that's a little bit of data there to think about. And then here's when we run through the iTree calculator. Of course, it's a little smaller than Somerville, just it's a smaller area, but it just gives them an idea of what's going on with the carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, ozone, and the particulate matter. And here we have the carbon sequestration. And so that's really similar to what we were looking at for Somerville. And here in Irma, you can see that in the 70s and 2000s, it was 14 days per year over 100 degrees. And then, you know, in the future, it'll be 97 unless we kind of do some kind of an intervention or something. So, so that's something to think about. And then here we have how the tree canopy percentage influences the temperature. And so here's Greenville. They kind of lack some tree canopy and got a lot of impervious surfaces in their commercial districts. But, you know, I think that's something that they're watching out for, and they're, you know, really trying to pay attention to. They've got a really great group, Trees Upstate, that helps them plant trees, and so they've been really great to work with on this tree planting campaign. They're very, very organized, and so yeah, Trees Upstate would be great to have something like that down here to help us, and you know, kind of these nonprofits can really be helpful if they're organized well. So here we have their air quality benefits for carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, and ozone, just like we had before using the iTree. And here's the carbon sequestration. And this is kind of what we had looked at before for the other areas. And so if we can see that in 1971 to 2000, we only had 5 days per year that were above 100, and now we're looking, you know, at 45 to 78 as time goes by. So and here again we have the tree canopy. As that increases, the temperature will go down. And so I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, what are some actions that we can take. So mapping tree canopy is something that the Forestry Commission you know, recommends. And so mapping tree canopy identifies low canopy neighborhoods or districts. And so they, you know, just kind of improve air quality in different areas. Mapping can also identify inequities in green infrastructure investment in minority or low income neighborhoods, or both. We want to share the knowledge on green infrastructure benefits with the community, and use tree canopy data and climate action plans or other sustainability plans, and set benchmarks for increasing or maintaining tree canopy, and plant trees and other green infrastructure to mitigate poor air impact qualities. And also it has a great impact on stormwater as well, but I'm just concentrating mainly on air quality. And this is something that we worked on with the Green Infrastructure Center to develop on a large grant that was about a 7-state project. And we made a codes and ordinances audit tool to reduce the amount of pervious surfaces and create good urban forest management practices for codes and ordinances. And it's a great resource. It's you can use this link here, but we also have it linked to the website too. So if you put South Carolina Forestry Commission and look under urban and community forestry, you can find it as well. But it helps you rate where you're at. So, you know, you as a planner or you can, you know, direct somebody that works for you to do this, kind of look and see where you're at, and it kind of gives you a rating. So, and something to maybe shoot for, and you kind of decide, what area you want to go and improve in. And so things to consider when mitigating air pollution in urban settings using green infrastructure: consider equity. Not all urban settings are the same, so street canyons versus open roadways. So, just kind of how the wind behaves and with buildings. Species is important. You want to make sure you're not planting invasive species. You want to, some species create more volatile organic compounds. You want to avoid species with pollen allergens, and non-poisonous species. Trees that are tolerant of urban stressors. I mean, ball cypress is great if you've got the room. I was going to mention too, like the right tree, the right place. And the more benefit you get out of a tree, the larger it is. So if you've got the space to plant the tree, it's going to be also as well longer lived. So you can plant like a small, medium, or a large tree. And so just kind of know your site. And then evergreen species for continuous year-round impact. As far as for stormwater, evergreen species are the best. They have the best surface area for taking in, water, and also, for air particulate matter. And they're always growing. So, sometimes, in the winter, trees, the leaves fall off. So, you've just got a lot more action happen from the evergreen. And then small, complex, or compound leaves for greater surface area. And I did mention the right tree, right place. So, and we're glad to help with species selection as well. So that kind of brings me to an end. This is kind of a little bit of an overview I wanted to share with you guys. And if you had any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them now. So thank you.
Hey, do you have a web page or some place to go where somebody can go and look at the different species of trees and which ones are trees and stuff like that?
Yeah, if you go on the South Carolina Forestry Commission, I think it's under tree care and community forestry. It's like, if you go on our webpage, it's the left-hand link, and it's actually the longest one, but it says something like tree care and urban forestry, and you click on that, and then you're kind of on the urban and community forestry webpage, and it's got information like that on there. And it's also got a lot of projects that we've done together with Green Infrastructure Center, some other projects. The stormwater one's pretty interesting.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Hey.
For Francis?
Yeah, this is Sharon again. And Natalie, I just want to say I enjoy seeing your cat.
I can't believe I missed the cat. Oh, I love cats. Oh, beautiful.
I guess I just want to make it, I guess it's a two-edged sword, just from observation in my neighborhood with the tree canopy. Where I see homes with the solar panels going in, the tree canopy is disappearing in their yard, because you've got to allow the sun to shine on the canopy. So, how's that being addressed as far as, to get a balance there?
Well, I think, everybody's, I kind of mentioned, I kind of hit on that earlier, where you can plant, there's a lot of places where you could plant a tree, but you might not want to because there's a conflicting use. So if you have like soccer fields, or, you don't want to start shading out your grass, you have an area where you want to plant, grow a garden that needs the full sun. So if someone has decided, hey, I want solar panels or whatever, that would be kind of their best and highest use in their opinion, and they can do that. It's private property. So, I guess there's also, things like that you need to consider. So I guess there's no 100% right answer on like where to plant a tree or where not to plant a tree. It's kind of a decision you need to take into account a lot of factors.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, in the neighborhood I live in, we have beautiful tree canopy, and it's slowly disappearing, due to the homes that are installing solar panels, that they're, taking down these beautiful old oaks, from their yards without replacing, any other trees farther out in their yard, or, a smaller variety. So it was just a, observation.
Yeah, that made me think too. with the tree planting campaign, only 20% of the trees are in a municipality. So we're also kind of making an outreach to homeowners as well, and with some tree giveaways and things. So we're going to be kind of talking about like what the benefits are, and you know, what kind of tree you might want to plant, and what size and why. And so that way we're kind of getting people to think about what the benefits might be, and that way they can make a really informed decision about, you know, with something like that, maybe give them some things that they haven't thought about, some of the benefits of trees. So.
Do we have any other questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Francis. That was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we are going to turn it over to Sam Christmas to give us the update on the state of the air quality from DHEC.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Oh gosh, it's asking for my system preferences. Give me 1 minute. I knew something like this would happen.
I know, it's always fun trying to figure that out.
We always use Teams, so. Okay, so it looks like in order to enable Zoom to share my screen, I have to quit and then come right back. So give me 1 minute.
I was talking and you guys couldn't hear me. I'm sorry. I was just remarking on all the cats and dogs I've seen today on the screens. I miss working from home and hanging out with my dogs.
All right, round two.
All right.
Are you able to see that now?
Yes, we are.
Okay. All right, thanks everybody. My name is Sam Christmas. I work in the Division of Emissions Evaluation Support in the Bureau of Air Quality at South Carolina DHEC. And so for this update, I'm just gonna run through, first of all, some of the graphs we have for different pollutants in South Carolina and where the levels are at with regard to the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. And then after that, I'll talk a little bit about the monitoring network we have throughout South Carolina and some of the recent changes that have happened, particularly in the BCD COG area. And then I'll finish up by talking about some of the outreach and education programs we have available. All right, so the first few graphs are going to look like this. This is a graph for ozone. So you can see that each of the different colored lines represents a different area of South Carolina. And then the red lines are the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. Those are either going to be in parts per million or micrograms per meter cubed. So these basically just show the standards that were set at different times. You can see there the 2008 standard and the 2015 standard. So for this first pollutant, ozone, it's the 8-hour the design value, which is the design value is basically what we've recorded and our reading from our monitors. And then down at the bottom, you can see the pollutant. This is going to be for primary and secondary. That just refers to primary basically refers to the standard for public health, so how these pollutants affect humans, and then secondary is for general welfare, so how it affects the natural environment, buildings, animals, and so on. And then averaging time, the period of time over which the monitor is taking this reading, the level of the pollutant, 0.07 parts per million. And then the form is basically how our data analysis people bring together the data and create this value. So you can see that throughout South Carolina, for ozone, everybody's below the 2015 standard, except for that gray line, which represents the Charlotte, York County area. So that has been kind of just coasting along the 2015 standard for a while now. Yeah, so basically there is a somewhat of a risk that the York County could go back into non-attainment, but that'll be seen in the future. This is the PM 2.5 24-hour design value. So the 2006 and 2012 NACs remained the same at 35 micrograms per meter cubed, and you can see that thankfully every area of South Carolina is well below that standard. This is PM 2.5 annual design value. So the difference is basically just a different way of measuring the same pollutant, but you can see that we're well below the standard based on the 2012 National Ambient Air Quality Standard. So with regard to ozone and PM 2.5, every 5 years, the EPA is required to reassess the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. And since these are health-based standards, basically they look at the most up-to-date research and see if there is, if the body of evidence basically suggests that the standard needs to be changed. So typically the trend over time has been that the standard over time has been lowered because more and more scientific research shows that air pollution is a greater harm to human health. So basically, as we learn more about air pollution's effect on the cardiorespiratory system and on the environment as well, on trees and buildings and things like that, generally the standard has gone down. But so right now they're holding steady. This could change perhaps if the election, if Joe Biden were to get elected and his EPA had different different goals or wanted to reassess these standards, it is possible that those could change. This is the PM10 design values over the last 10 years. You can see that we're well below the standard. I'm pretty sure that spike in the Greenville-Anderson area in 2016 was due to the wildfires in North Carolina. So that's a pretty stark reminder of how, we generally don't really deal with a lot of wildfires here compared to other, areas of the country out west. But you can see that jump in 2016 on the gray line shows the pretty significant impact that wildfires can have on air pollution, particularly PM10. When it comes to carbon monoxide, there's not much of a issue there in South Carolina. You can see that the standard's at 35 parts per million, and the data we have for a few different areas of South Carolina is well below that, below 5 parts per million. That's largely due to ever since catalytic converters and different emission controls have been installed on modern vehicles, carbon monoxide has been much less of an issue. And again, this is carbon monoxide just measured in a different way for 8 hours, and you can see that it's still very well below the national standard. Nitrogen dioxide is a concern. Not because it's high in South Carolina, but just with regard to I manage the Diesel Emission Reduction Act grants for South Carolina, and nitrogen oxides are one of the primary pollutants from diesel engines. But you can see that overall across the state, we're well below the standard for NOx. And again, this is another nitrogen dioxide graph for the annual measurement, showing we're well below the standard. Sulfur dioxide, you can see, I think Natalie talked a little bit. She might have mentioned that sulfur dioxide is produced by coal-fired power plants. It's also all diesel that's sold at gas stations in the United States is ultra-low sulfur diesel. But for a lot of maritime uses, ships can still be using bunker diesel or heavy fuel oil, which contains a lot of sulfur. But still South Carolina pretty much everywhere it is below the standard. So here's a map of the comprehensive ambient monitoring network throughout the state, and also part of North Carolina, because we're kind of looped into that Charlotte, Concord, Gastonia region. And you can see the monitors being concentrated around the population centers in Columbia, Greenville, Charleston, Charlotte, and Augusta. A few monitoring changes that we wanted to mention come into the Low Country, or that have already come to the Low Country. The Bushy Park ozone monitoring site has been replaced by Monk's Corner National Guard site. North Charleston Fire Department, PM 2.5 is being discussed as a replacement for CPW and FAA. And then the Irving Street site is currently up and running, measuring PM 2.5, NOx, and sulfur dioxide. So we're going to be looking at basically the comparison of before and after the new terminal at the Ports Authority gets operational. And zooming down specifically to the BCD area, here are some of those monitoring sites that I just mentioned. It looks like we've got 6 sites throughout this region. So now to speak a little bit about the grant programs and outreach, which is what myself and Amy do. First off, I wanted to mention the Breathe Better for Schools and Businesses. Amy runs this program. It's an anti-idling program that works with schools and businesses in South Carolina. Hasn't been quite as active due to COVID, understandably, because a lot of, well, thankfully, there aren't a lot of parents lined up idling their vehicles outside of schools, which is good. But yeah, Amy expects this program to get up and going once we, recover from COVID. So basically, she works with these schools to explain the benefits of reducing these pollutants from vehicles and how that they can positively influence both the health of the students, the teachers, and the parents coming to pick their kids up. As I mentioned, I manage the DARE grants for South Carolina DHEC. These are Diesel Emission Reduction Act grants from the Environmental Protection Agency. So we get a yearly allocation from EPA, which is usually $300,000 or $400,000, which we use to basically create our own in-state grant program. So we currently receive, or we closed our application period for this year back last week on Friday, and I'm currently looking over the 8 applications that we got. So we'll be excited to issue some more grants in the coming weeks. The National DARA is a more competitive program for up to $2 million. And in EPA Region 4, which is the Southeast, there's usually 5 to 10 of those issued each grant cycle. And we've received national grants in 2012, 2016, and 2019. Most recently, the 2019 grant was with the Ports Authority. I know Mark Messersmith is on the call. So we've been working closely to install 12 hybrid diesel engines at the Wando Welch terminal down there. So that's an exciting project. DARA also has a school bus rebate program, and the South Carolina Department of Education works directly with EPA to do that. And then the DARA tribal grants are grants that are available to Native American Indian tribes, but I do not believe that any tribe in South Carolina has utilized that, but that option is available. So feel free to please reach out to me if you have any questions about diesel reduction grants. The Air Quality Coalitions and EPA Advance, obviously we're currently at a meeting for the BCD COG Air Quality Coalition, but we have a network of coalitions throughout the state that are focused on maintaining good air quality in South Carolina and bringing together resources and collaborative efforts to keep our air clean. Thankfully, as we've seen in the graph, that overall South Carolina does enjoy good air quality. And so we also participate in the EPA Advance program, which is a program EPA created for areas that are in attainment. So they're meeting the standard, but they basically want to go above and beyond to continue reducing emissions and encourage that that kind of like grassroots community involvement to remain in attainment. So you can contact either myself or Amy if you'd like to learn any more about that. We just updated our webpage at scdhec.gov/advance. And we also have what we call the ART, the Advanced Reporting Tool. So that's an interactive page that if an individual or an organization in South Carolina has an emissions reduction program that they'd like to be recognized for, they can fill out that page. Basically, we'll compile it in an annual report to EPA to show them all the things that are going on in South Carolina that are basically focused on going above and beyond just meeting the standard, but we want to reduce as many emissions as possible. And on that same form, you'll have the opportunity to choose if you'd like to be in the running for the Spirit of the Air Award, which is an award the Bureau of Air Quality gives out each year to recognize a really outstanding community member or organization that's doing great things for air quality. The USDE Green Ribbon Schools program is obviously an effort of the U.S. Department of Education to recognize schools for excelling in 3 areas: reducing environmental impacts, improving health and wellness, and teaching effective environmental and sustainability education. We're proud that in South Carolina, 3 schools have been recognized in the last 2 years. They've been nationally recognized for their environmental and sustainability efforts. So Amy has been managing that program, and you can reach out to her if your kid's school or a school that you work with is doing really outstanding work and would like to submit an application to have the chance to be recognized. And lastly, we have the South Carolina Radon program. Radon is a carcinogenic, colorless, odorless gas that is emitted from the decay of uranium in the ground. So it's naturally occurring, but it can pose a risk to homes that maybe are sitting on top of some of these deposits of radioactive material. So we have the Radon program that offers free test kits, free educational resources. So if you'd like a test kit to test your home, you can check that out at scdhec.gov/radon, and our coworker Leslie manages that program. So this is my information, and then the information of Mary Peyton Wall and Renee Madden, who put together those graphs and work in our data analysis section. So if you have any specific questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I might be able to answer them myself or forward you on to them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. Does anybody have any questions for Sam? I'm excited to check out your the advanced website.
Yes, please do.
I will. All righty. If we have no questions for Sam, it's time to sort of go around the virtual room. If anybody has any updates on their own air quality efforts that they want to talk about, and you can just unmute and talk. Nobody has any updates? All righty. Well, with that, we will go ahead and adjourn. I'd like to thank our speakers, Sam Christmas, Francis Waite, and Natalie Olson, for coming and giving us these great presentations. And we'll see you all next quarter. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.